Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason. I'm speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. And today I am finishing my list of top 20 movies in the decade of the 1990s with number 5 through number 1. Looking at my list of the 1990s, I have to say this is probably my favorite decade of movies of all time. As I'm looking at these movies, especially this top 5. This top 5 is definitely the best top 5 I've had, and I think I will have in a decade. Just say my top 4 movies of this decade are in my top 10 list of all time. So that's like twice as many as any other decade I have in my top 10 list all time. So I mean, that's pretty huge. The number 5 movie on my list here is in my top 15 favorite movies of all time. So I've got the top 5 favorite movies of the 1990s is in my top 15, top 4 in my top 10, and I think my top 2 are in my top 5. I don't know, something like that. So just say, I mean, I absolutely love these movies. Favorite movies of all time are on this list, or on the next 5 movies I'm going to talk about. And also I want to say, in 1995, huge year in movies for me. Looking at my list, I've got 6 movies on my top 20 favorite movies of the 90s, all from the year 1995. So 6 from just that year. In my top 5, I've got 3 movies in my top 5, all from 1995. And they're all in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. So 3 movies from 1995 make my top 10 all time. So to me, 1995, in my opinion, is the best movie year of all time. Obviously, you're going to make a case for 1939 because it has Gone with the Wind and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and Wizard of Oz. You can make a very good case for 1939, and I would totally understand that if you think that's the best year of movies. It'd be interesting to look back. That's one of the things I would love to do, is look back at each year, try to figure out what was the best year in movies. But right now, for me, I say 1995. Anyway, so just a little bit to tell you how big these movies are for me. At number 5, very interesting movie. It's the only, I'd say it's the only foreign film I have that I own that's not an action movie, because I have a lot of kung fu movies that I own. But this is my only drama foreign film that I own anyways, and it's on my list. It is Life is Beautiful. Came from Italy. It's stars and directed by an Italian actor named Roberto Benigni. Of course, this is what he's most famous for, is this movie in America. He's very well known in Italy. It's kind of more of one of the great comedic actors in Italy. Unfortunately, a lot of his stuff hasn't really come to America and really been that big. And even the movies he's made after this haven't made it that big in America. In fact, they've done pretty poorly. He hasn't really been making movies lately, but this is definitely his masterpiece movie. Roberto Benigni. If you remember, he won the Oscar for Best Actor for this movie, and it also won Best Foreign Film, in which he got on top of the seats and walked across the seats, or stood on some of the seats. You know, I mean, he's such an excited guy. If you look up interviews on YouTube, he's just full of energy and excitement. Very funny guy. Life is Beautiful is a very unique movie. Never seen a movie anything like this one. It's almost like 2 movies in one. The first half of the movie is more like a romantic comedy, where Roberto Benigni's character falls in love with this Italian girl. He's Jewish, she's not, and it's right around, of course, World War II and what's going on there with the Jews in Europe. And it's all about him trying to, and then this girl he falls in love with is engaged, and she doesn't really love him that much, and so it's about him kind of getting her to leave him to marry him, Roberto Benigni's character. And so it's a really wonderful romantic comedy, like the best romantic comedy ever. Absolutely love the first half of this movie. It's my favorite part of the movie, just him trying to get this girl to fall in love with him, and it's very funny, very romantic, very sweet. In the second half of the movie, they spoiler alerts for the movie, they get married and have a son, and then the Holocaust happens, and Jews are being rounded up and put on trains and go into concentration camps. which obviously is very dark subject matter. Um, and so he gets him and his son get put on a train. His wife voluntarily gets on a train because he sees her husband and son get on one, so she decides to get on one too, even though she doesn't need to. Um, you know, I don't know, kind of sacrifice herself. Uh, and so, yeah, second half of the movie, they're in a concentration camp, you know, but still somehow it's a comedy. And that's the very unique balance that this movie has to make. It does, you know, it does show that, you know, being in a concentration camp is terrible, it's horrible, and really bad things are happening, and there's some sad moments, and you know, yeah, very bad, you know, bad things are happening, and but yet somehow he still is able to put some comedy in there, which you would think, how could you put comedy in a Holocaust movie without, you know, making fun of the Holocaust or, you know, what's going on there. But I think he does it in a very interesting way, in which he does it so his son doesn't see all the tragedy of the Holocaust. He tries to make it a game, as if, you know, if you survive, then you win the game. And so that way he makes it for his son like a fun experience somehow, or that something good's going to happen in the end if he, you know, follows the rules. And so he does this because of his love for his son and not wanting his son to, you know, be scared and, you know, kind of know all the really bad stuff that's happening. He wants to keep that all away from his son. So he kind of makes it all up that, you know, nothing bad is happening, even though bad stuff is happening. Anyway, so because he's doing that for his son, somehow he's able to actually use some comedic moments in the movie that work well, anyway, for me. So I absolutely love this movie for, you know, just the uniqueness to it. The comedy is very funny. Roberto Benigni's amazing in the role. Great character, one of my favorite characters of all time that he's created here. And also, like I said, the romantic part is actually really, really good too. Anyways, that's why it's number 5 on my list of the 1990s. This one came out, I believe, 1997. Okay, so 1997. Of course, big year for that year with Titanic and all that coming out. Number 4 on my list is a real-life story drama called Apollo 13. You see a great cast there. You got the 3 astronauts that are on Apollo 13. Tom Hanks, Bill Paxton, Kevin Bacon. Ed Harris plays the commander, I believe, the flight commander, I believe he is. Of course, it's a real story about happening in the 70s. Apollo 13 went up and something bad happened, and it was supposed to go to the moon, but something wrong happened on the ship. And so then they weren't able to make it to the moon, and then it became can we get these 3 astronauts back to Earth alive? You know, and so it was a moment, you know, I don't know if it took a week or it took a little while to get them back home safely. And they, of course, spoilers for the movie, in real life, they came home safely. So this kind of telling that story of, you know, what it was like. And it's really great drama. Of course, acting is superb. Love all the actors. Gary Sinise also plays a great part. And then all the NASA engineers are really good, like character actors. So all the scenes are just amazing. And I love the, you know, just the space flight is so cool. Seeing the Apollo 13 go up, you know, how that all works out and how it goes up into space. Really cool scene, of course, in inner space, and you get to see the gravity and them floating around. Best movie about space I've ever seen, for sure. And then I just love the whole drama of these 3 astronauts. It seems like this impossible task. How are we going to get back home? Being alone in space has got to be the worst thing in the world, and just a scary feeling. And just watching the astronauts in the spacecraft trying to figure out how to keep alive and going back and forth, lots of, you know, going back and forth and trying to figure out what to do and try to solve each problem as it comes along. And then you also see the NASA, all their engineers, you know, working out problems themselves. And you see a lot of smart people. I just love this idea of like all these smart people, you know, solving these really difficult problems and not quitting, and, you know, not failure is not an option. and they're gonna do everything in their power to bring these three astronauts back home alive. And I just love that aspect of the movie, of these people being able to get together and work together and solve this problem. This, you know, to me, that's just a really cool idea that really happened in real life, and it's done so well. Ron Howard, I think, really underrated director in my opinion. He gets a lot of flack, but I think this is his best movie that he's ever directed, and he does such a great job. So Apollo 13 came from 1995, one of those movies I was talking about. It's number 3 on my list, epic action sword and sandal movie, I guess you call it, about freedom, called Braveheart. They're directed and starring Mel Gibson as William Wallace, fighting for Scottish freedom from the English king and the evil English Empire at the time. Were really oppressing the Scottish people. And you see William Wallace as a kid, seeing all this bad stuff that the English have done, killing his dad and everything, and him growing up to be a man who then falls in love. There's a really nice romantic love story in there that I really like, really well done. And anyway, something happens there. William Wallace eventually kind of leads the rebellion against the king, which against England, which England is a much more powerful nation that Scotland is. So it seems like an impossible task to go up against England. They have a much vast army and technology that the Scots don't have. But the Scots are fighting for their freedom. They're more passionate. And William Wallace is a great leader, of course, great motivator. He gives one of the all-time great speeches about freedom and why should we fight for our freedom. I just love it so much. Mel Gibson's so great in this lead role, so charismatic, and such a great look, and he does such a great job. And of course, Mel Gibson directed, won the Oscar for Best Director, won the Oscar for Best Picture in 1995. Also, I think costuming and makeup also was really good and won some Oscars. Yeah, it's just a great story. I just love the patriotism of the Scots fighting for freedom. Just like as an American, I have a lot of patriotism for America fighting for its freedom. When we fought the English and got our independence back in 1776, and so I kind of sympathized with the Scots trying to fight for their own independence, and really root for them. The battle scenes are really well done. Of course, very gruesome. I say gruesome at the time for sure. As far as people getting heads cut off and limbs cut off, a lot of sword fighting and so forth, and just a really great story of how they get their independence and how William Wallace is fights and doesn't quit and fights for what he loves and who he loves and all that. And also I say the musical score by I believe James Horner, who I should say also did Apollo 13 has a great musical score also. I love James Horner, one of my favorites. His musical score is like my favorite musical score of all time. I love the musical score on Braveheart. The flutes and the Scottish bagpipes and all that stuff give this really Scottish sound to it that's really beautiful, really well done. Also, cinematography is absolutely beautiful. I think most of the movie is actually shot in Ireland because Ireland's actually more beautiful than Scotland. But the scenes of these, green hills and just so beautiful with the music. That's my favorite part. Just looking at the, scenic areas with the music. It's just so great. And love the great ending of the movie. Anyway, so that's Braveheart from 1995. So now we get to my top 2. Number 2 is another Best Picture winner from a year before, 1994. And it is Forrest Gump, won the Best Picture in 1994, directed by Robert Zemeckis, starring Tom Hanks in an Oscar-winning role. I think maybe the best role of his life. Absolutely love him in this movie. He's really just loses himself into this character, this Forrest Gump character, and ceases to be Tom Hanks anymore. I don't even know it's Tom Hanks. And I'm a huge fan of Tom Hanks, my favorite actor probably of all time. And he just loses himself, and he's Forrest Gump. And sometimes he's funny, sometimes it's very sad moments, very dramatic moments. And he just, looking at his face, I just when he has a funeral scene where he's talking to the gravestone, it's just it makes me cry every time I watch it. because you see the emotions on Tom Hanks' face. It's done so incredibly well. There's a couple of really sad moments actually in this movie, with people dying, but it's also somewhat of a comedy. There's definitely some very comedic parts, and it's a movie where you see Forrest Gump go through history, and he kind of impacts these historical moments, which is kind of a funny idea. And he meets different presidents, and he's involved with stuff like the Watergate scandal and all that, and talks to people like John Lennon, a lot of famous people. And so it's interesting, like there's these ideas that things that he does or says impacts real life events, so he put him in history, which I like that fact. Interesting that they put him with these real footage. They somehow put Tom Hanks' Forrest Gump in it to make it look like he was actually in that event, which is really cool at the moment. I mean, it's nothing now, but I remember I think it won Best Special Effects this movie, because we hadn't really seen someone do that, where they put somebody today into a real life historical video and somehow try to make it flow well. It doesn't flow great now. Looking back, the special effects are a little dated. You can tell that they're special effects. But at the time, that was pretty amazing. Of course, Lieutenant Dan doesn't have any legs, and that was also pretty amazing, because of course Gary Sinise playing Lieutenant Dan does have legs, and so they had to cut out the legs to make him look like digitally, not real, but digitally they had to cut out the legs to make him look like he didn't have any legs, and that was pretty incredible too at the time, if I remember right. Anyways, just so many incredible things, so many great scenes, so many memorable lines. Life is like a box of chocolates. Stupid is, stupid does. Run, Forrest, run. I mean, all these lines you remember, and just wonderfully shot. Really, some beautiful scenes in this movie. I mean, he goes to Vietnam, and there's a whole Vietnam War part. It's very well done, and like I love the scene where he's running, where he decides like he's just going to run for a long time, and you see these great scenes of him running, like in Arizona. In New Mexico area, I think, and you see the sun coming up, and it's just and he's on the road running with all these people, and it's just so beautiful. So there's so many great things in this movie. Like I said, acting's phenomenal. Like I said, Tom Hanks so deserving of his Best Actor Oscar. I thought Gary Sinise should have won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for Lieutenant Dan. Does such a great moment of this guy, and such a great character arc for this guy who loses his legs in Vietnam and is bitter about it, and how he kind of gets over that. It's such a great story. And then of course Jenny, the Forrest Gump's girlfriend in it, Robert Wright Penn, great performance too from her. And I also love the story between Forrest and Jenny. I think it's a really great kind of love story. Even though she continually kind of leaves him, he never forgets her. He never gets over her, and he's always wanting to get back with her. And somehow, no matter what happens, they always come back together. It's almost like fate, lines of stars. They just can't get away from each other. They're just meant for each other, and I just love that aspect of the movie. Anyway, so I can go on and on about Forrest Gump. So it's such a great movie from 1994. So it goes to my number one favorite movie of the 1990s. And this is not a movie a lot of people, I don't know, talk about as much, and it's not a Best Picture winner or nominee or anything, but it's one of the most inspirational movies I've ever seen. In fact, it's kind of changed my life in some senses, or it did at one point. It inspired me to want to be a teacher at one point in my life, and it's called Mr. Holland's Opus, starring Richard Dreyfuss as Mr. Holland. Like I said, it's such an inspirational movie about a guy who doesn't want to be a teacher. He loves music, and he wants to write a musical score, be like a really famous conductor and all that. But he guess not. It's not working out, and so he decides to fall back on being a teacher as something temporary to do and save some money, and to where he can maybe do what he really wants to do, his dream job. So he gets into teaching, not really wanting to do it, and doesn't really like doing it at first. But then he kind of decides to really want to help the students out, and really find ways to help students, and not just do well in music as a music teacher, but in life in general. He helps them get confidence in themselves and to go out and a lot of them you see later on get good jobs, and then you think or do whatever they want to do, and thanks to him and him inspiring his students to be better. And that's what I love about the movie, is this idea of inspiring, not just teaching your children, or not just teaching students music is one thing, teaching notes on a page as he says in the movie, but also inspiring them to want to be better, and to not give up, and all these things, and life lessons basically. One point the principal gives them a compass, saying teachers not only they're like a compass, they direct people's lives, not just teaching them whatever it is they do, they're also directing lives and changing lives. And I kind of love that idea about it. And I love this movie because it goes from 1965, I believe, to 1995. So you get to see 30 years of history as this guy is a teacher. And I love you see the different decades go, and see the different changes, and of course both the fashion styles, but also what's going on out in the world. The music styles are changing. Of course Mr. Holland's life is changing. He has a son. You see his son grow up to be a teenager basically, or you see him to be an adult at the end of the movie basically. So you see all these life changes are happening to him, plus all the changes are happening in America. And so I just love all that. And I love there's a lot of montages in the movie. I love montages. Like it's one of my favorite things in a movie, when you do a really good emotional montage to music. And there's so much great music. They use a lot of music from the 60s and 70s. And the music changes. I think as it goes on, they use different music for the different decades, as they kind of introduce each decade coming in. And they do montages of news events that happen in each decade to music, and I just love that. It just gives a really emotional kick, when they do that. Very emotional movie, actually. I said Richard Dreyfuss, phenomenal. I think should have won the Oscar for Best Actor in 1995. Does such a great job of, portraying someone just starting out, like in their 30s, and then being at retirement age at the end of the movie. So it really changes age-wise, Richard Dreyfuss. And I said it's a mixture of comedy and drama. There's some good comedy parts to it, and then there's some amazing dramatic parts. Of course, one of the spoilers for the movie, but his son is deaf, and so there's some really heart-aching moments between him and his wife, dealing with a deaf son and what to do for him, what's best for his life, and being kind of sad because he's a music teacher with a son who can't listen to music. So it's such a great dramatic moment between them, and what he does to the son, and then he has problems with the son. And seeing him get reconciled with his son, so beautiful and so emotional moments there. And then just the end where he's kind of forced to retire, but he doesn't want to retire. And then there's this great moment where all the students come back to tell him, how he's changed their lives, and kind of celebrate his career. And it's such a great moment to say, this guy feels like he worked hard, and now he's got to retire, and wonders if it was all worth it. But then he sees all the students come back and thank him for what he did for them, and just get that that it was worth it, and that he did do something special in his life. Even if he didn't do his dream job, being a teacher was much better than what his dream job was, and he accomplished more and changed more lives being a teacher, even though that's not what he set out to do. Anyway, so I just love that idea of accidentally getting into something that you absolutely love and want to do, and you're doing stuff. And I always want to do things for other people. I want to do something in my life where I'm changing other people's lives in some way. That's always a dream, and I love the idea that he gets to do that. For me, myself, I actually went to school to be a teacher and got a degree in teaching history, and substitute taught for about 3 years, but there was no jobs, and so then I ended up going to being a nurse aide, and I help people in nursing homes. So I feel like that too, that like I want to go out there and hopefully I'm doing something good for people, and so that's why this movie's so big for me, because it inspired me to want to be like Mr. Holland, I guess, fictional character in this movie, and really think about other people, and sacrifice for other people, and make a difference in the world. You always want to make a difference in the world, which I feel Mr. Holland did, and something I want to do myself anyway. So That's why Mr. Holland's my favorite movie of the 90s, one of my favorite movies of all time. Absolutely love it. Definitely check this movie out if you haven't seen it. Really good, feel-good movie. So that's my end of my 1990s. Hope you enjoyed that. Going down that memory lane of that decade. It's so big for me, like I said, because I kind of grew up in that decade. It was a big decade for me, and I love going through these movies again. And just feel free to comment what was your favorite movie of the 90s, or what's your top 5, top 10, whatever. I'd love to see what you think. I know people are going to have different top movies, because I see a lot of top movies in the 90s, and I know I missed out on a lot of movies that people talk about, like Shawshank Redemption, Pulp Fiction, Titanic. I didn't have those in my top 20, and not that they're not bad movies at all. They're just not my kind of movies. I think I mean, Titanic's, you know, it's not a bad movie. It probably barely missed my top 20, but like Pulp Fiction, Shawshank Redemption, Silence of the Lambs, those kind of movies, very well done movies. A lot of good stuff in them. I guess they're a little dark for me. I like more lighthearted, feel-good movies, comedy dramas, action comedies. I guess that's sci-fi. Those are more in my wheelhouse than kind of the more darker, more violent movies. And so that's why they didn't make my list. But I totally understand people will have those at the top of their list, and I totally understand critics love those movies, really well acted and well directed and all that. But anyway, so if that's your favorite movie, you know, that's fine with me. Just hopefully you don't, you know, hate my list too much for what I like, but that's what I like. So anyway, so yeah, comment, and just thank you for subscribing and for watching these videos, and just give me the support, and I really appreciate all of you. Have a good day.